Hello everyone, welcome to part 4 of my Jurassic World Alive 2.7 tier list series. Today we'll be doing low, mid, and high elite. This will probably be my longest video yet because these tiers are very crowded, especially mid elite. In fact, mid elite is I think the second most crowded tier in the entire list. So yeah, we'll start from the bottom, low elite, with the rares since there are no commons here, obviously. Alright, starting with Ankylocodon. So, Ankylocodon is a kind of a generalist, fierce, resilient creature. Um, so it's slow, has good health, low damage, armor and crit chance, really good resistances, and then a pretty good move set. The only problem with it is the damage output's really bad. But honestly, I still think this is one of the best rares in the game. Uh, just due to it still not having the worst damage output and having a decent crit chance and really good survivability with those resistances. Alright, next is Compsognathus Gen 2. Compy Gen 2 is really good rare. It's better than the Epic Compies, so it this health number is deceiving. It's a flock creature, so it automatically has way more than this. Damage is kind of low, which is a little bit of an issue, but I don't really think it hurts this thing too much. Of course, it's fast, and then it's got some resistances. Okay, the best thing about this is the absolutely ridiculous moveset. Courageous Alert is busted. Priority Strike with a guaranteed crit, or with a dodge when you're threatened. That's kind of insane. And then Hop and Mock is... Hop and Mock's not like a great move, but it's not a bad move at all. It's a pretty decent move. And an Impact and Run. And an Alert the Flock, which... when you're threatened, you can swap it back in and probably heal. And an Alert Swarm, which... I don't know why, but I've never gotten a chance to actually use the Alert Swarm because no one has ever swapped out against my compies in rare tournaments. But yeah, compy is crazy. It's got swap synergy. It's got possibly the best basic move in the game. It's got a lot of good things about it. Okay, Doedicurus. So Doedicurus is just a rolling ball of death and destruction that refuses to die unless it's met with bleed or defense shattering attacks. So this thing's health may not seem impressive until you realize that you can essentially double that health because it has 50% armor. And then for something that's this tanky, the damage is actually pretty decent. These resistances are useless. Don't even look at them. Resilient Strike, Resilient Rampage at this base damage, and that survivability is a little bit ridiculous. 3,600 in 2 turns. If Andrewsarchus swaps into this, then it's going to lose. And Andrewsarchus is meant to beat tanks. Of course, Andrewsarchus would beat it without swapping in, but still. And then Gravitonic Shields could be used to shrug off hits even more. Doedicurus is awesome. Dracorex. I think Dracorex is better than the Zootoceratops, though many will disagree. It's got a little bit less survivability, but it's much faster and has higher damage output. And then it's got anti-distract and a priority move, and anti-dodge. So yeah. It's got decent damage for a swapper, and it's really tanky and really pretty fast. It will lose to Ornithomimus and Kalenkin if it swaps in on it, but I'm pretty sure Nazuto does too. Oh, well, at least Nazuto loses to Ornith. But yeah, Dracorex is really good. It's basically a must in rare tournaments. It even does well in boosted arena. I've seen some boosted, like I've looked at some top boosted teams on the leaderboard. And I've seen Dracorexes there, though that was a while ago, and this doesn't count boosted. Still, very strong. Elasmotherium. Elasmotherium is basically Brontotherium, but it basically it's Brontotherium, but ridiculously OP in comparison. So compared to Brontotherium, it has more health, more armor, more damage, and it has a rampage. This thing will just this thing will delete chompers as well. Um, I believe that is enough damage to kill T-Rex Gen 2 in 2 hits. So basically, the biggest rare like Rex animation chomper creature is dead. And of course, I'm not counting Elasmotherium as a chomper. It's a rending dino. Elasmotherium is just a tank with big damage, and it's also really strong, which is why it's in low elite. By the way, a rare being in low elite, that is like a really good rare. Okay, Giraffatitan. Giraffatitan might be the worst rare in this tier, but it's still, in my opinion, quite underrated. It's just Brachie, but a bit worse. We'll get to Brachie later. Very high HP with a little bit of armor, and then the other stats are completely unnoteworthy. The resistances are good. So Swap and Slow is really not that useful. Time Bellow is okay, but it's not as good as Brachie's shielding move. Rampage is kind of a hit or miss compared to Resilient Rampage, because you can use it on turn 1, but it doesn't have all that extra resilient stuff. But I think for what this creature is, Rampage is, it's alright. So it's just a weaker Brachie, but that's still good. It's still really strong. They are on opposite ends of low elite, though. Okay, moving on to epics. Our first is Allosaurus Gen 2, which is among the weakest of this tier. Allo Gen 2 is Rex, but better. It's got less base damage, but more speed, higher crit chance, and also that base damage doesn't really matter. It has resistances, and Swap Prevention Immune is good. Cleansing Shattering Strike is automatically better than whatever Rex has as basic, Fear Strike, because it cleanses. So this thing has a way to deal with distraction. Though most of the good distraction creatures will two-shot it, so it won't matter. Although this thing does beat Velo, unlike Rex. So Velociraptor just gets one-shot by a strike. And then Fierce Impact, which is also what Rex has. And then Rending Takedown, which on a Chomper with such high base damage is probably worse than Defense Shattering Rampage. But I don't think it's that much. I don't think it's worse enough to make this on par with Rex. To make this not a tier better than Rex. So yeah. Unfortunately, this thing still can't beat Diplodocus, which is why another Epic Chomper is a tier higher than this. And Diplodocus is an absolute staple in Epic tournaments. And this one also loses to... if you want to include uniques, then this one loses to Mammaliania, and the other Chomper that I'm going to talk about later when we get to Mid-Elite doesn't. So yeah. Wait, no. The Mid-Elite Chomper does. I said that wrong. I don't even remember what I said. Okay, Allo Gen 2 loses to Mammaliania, Acro beats Mammaliania. I don't know what I was saying. Okay, Ankylodicurus. Ever since the Superiority Rampage buff, Ankylodicurus got a decent bit better. Just because it can chain these two moves and just do constant damage. With good survivability, decent base damage. Resistances. Distraction resistance is absolutely useless since all of its damaging moves cleanse distraction. I do wish it was D-Cell immune like its ingredient Ankylodon. Stun immunity is nice though, and bleed resistance doesn't hurt. Newtonic Shields is decent for shrugging hits, but I wouldn't say it's quite as useful on this as it is on Doedicurus. Because on Doedicurus just has that Resilient Strike, but this one actually has an impact for turn 1. And of course, Superior Vulnerability. If you want that setup damage, you could just use that and then do a absolutely massive Superiority Rampage. So yeah, Ankylodicurus is really good. All right, Brachiosaurus. So this is similar to Diplodocus, but better. It's got more health, more speed, higher crit chance, slightly less stun and swap prevention resistance, but I wouldn't really consider it much of a difference. And then I would say this is better than Bello right here, but not by a wide margin. And then this is maybe slightly better than Giraffodon's Rampage. It doesn't have to swap in, but I don't think that matters because swap in slow isn't a good move anyways. So Brachy, it's basically a defensive version of Diplodocus. His matchups aren't near as good against like legendaries and uniques and stuff, but it still has good matchups. It's got a good matchup spread, especially for a non-hybrid. Yeah, Brachy's good. Orlico Gamma is something that I see in Aviary, and I don't know why. I wouldn't think you'd be seeing too many low elites in Aviary. But regardless, this thing is good in an unboosted format. It's one of the for an epic hybrid for something that's not a legendary or unique. It has some high points. First of all, its damage output is pretty good. It doesn't quite reach 4,500 to 2 turns. If it did, it would probably be better than Elasmotherium. But it still gets pretty close, 4350 in 2 turns. If it had an impacted run, this thing would be probably mid-elite. Honestly, impacted run even Rampage run would make this thing way too powerful. So really fast. It's got some resistances, some pretty decent resistances, I'd say. Debilitating Distraction is really good. Precise Pounce is really good. Nimble Serum Strike's okay. Strike and Run, for this creature, I would say it works. But it obviously could be a lot better. Yeah, Liquid Gamma, it's one of the best probably the second best epic cunning creature. Yeah, it's really strong. Okay, Puritaurus. Puritaurus is near the bottom of this tier, but it's still really good. I enjoy using Puritaurus whenever I do use it in epic tournaments. Although with some of the new OP epics being added, I think it is starting to get outclassed more. With some federal creatures like Velociraptors and Exoticarus, etc. being added. But yeah, it is really strong still. So it's got, I think it's got the most health out of all the Rending counterattackers, save for Grypolith. Although I think Carnotarchus' armor makes it have a bit more effective HP. It's got low damage, but you don't really need damage when you're a Rending counterattacker. Low speed, whatever. Okay, Cleansing Strike's pretty decent. It's not as good as it used to be. Like when it was added, Bleed was still really strong, and you had to have something that could deal with Spinotasuchus, because Spinotasuchus is still really good. But it's not as useful as it was then. Now it's mainly for cleansing distraction now. Yeah. Short defense, blocking some attacks. Fierce Impact doing a bit more damage, but honestly, I don't really think it's not very much damage. Instant Distraction is probably the best move on this creature because you're just going to completely delete someone's damage for an entire turn while still getting a counterattack. And then the counterattack just shaves off 25% of the opponent's health, which is obviously really good. It's one of the best counterattacks. And then No Escape is always good, too. Overall, Puritaurus is really strong. Pyroraptor, another one of the weakest creatures in this tier, but I would say this is the best non-hybrid cunning in the game. Ornith the Mimus is a very close second, and Dakota Raptor is a very close third, but if I had to choose which one to take in a battle, I would choose Pyroraptor. So it's got more health than Ornith, same as Dakota Raptor, but less damage than Ornith, and much more than Dakota Raptor. Same speed as Dakota Raptor. So it's got still good health for a cunning, and then it's got a lot of damage. Speed is mid-level for a cunning creature. Cunning Strike, it's Cunning Strike. Pounce, it's a Raptor, of course it's gonna pounce. It's a distraction. It's a distraction is what I think makes this thing really good because it's gonna reduce something's damage to 0 and then get its pounce cooldown back. It's a really good get off me move, if that's how you say it. And it allows you to just get another 3,000 damage pounce off. Um, yeah, this thing's really strong. Imagine if it got its old 3,300 health left, then it'd be doing even more. Although, I don't really know if that'd affect any matchups, but it might. Alright, Scutosaurus. Another one of the weakest creatures in this tier. Scudo is basically Moschops, but a bit more defensive. Its base stats are better across the board. Same resistances, except it's vulnerable immune, which isn't useful at all. Still has its only strike, still has Revenge Assaulting Impact. But instead of Precise Rampage, this goes for a more defensive move, which is Revenge Protection. Revenge Protection, you're almost always to just be chaining Revenge Assaulting Impact and Revenge Protection. And then whenever a Distract or Dodge gets in your way, just Resilient Strike. This also doesn't have Moschops' Swap and Slow, but Swap and Slow isn't good, and it's even worse on Moschops because it's a revenge creature, and you can't have revenge when you're doing a swap in. Unless it's like a Rampage run, you did a run move out of a creature, but then that said creature died to like an on escape ability. But still, that is basically no use. The swap in, so it being removed on Scudo does not really affect anything. So yeah, if you've ever seen Scutosaurus versus Carbonemes matches in tournaments, you'll know how resilient these things are and how long it takes to kill them if you don't have fierce options. Yeah, Scudo's a really good epic, and it always has been since it was added. Alright, Titanoboa. So Titanoboa and Brachiosaurus are this close to being put into mid-elite, but I decided to put them in low-elite, because I didn't think they were quite on par with mid-elite epics like, honestly, Acro I could probably see in low-elite, and these I could see at the bottom of mid-elite, but Acro I think is slightly better, and then I wouldn't say these two are near as good as Sarcoryxis or Brontoplasmus. So yeah, Titanoboa is the best creature at being an on-escape dino. This thing is the pinnacle of anti-swap. And with swaps being so common, you could see why that would be really good. So it's got good health, good damage, and okay speed. Well, mid-level speed. Some pretty good resistances, except for this one. And then you don't need Resilient Strike at all, really, because Precise Rampage will go through dodge, and this thing can't be distracted. So you just need Precise Rampage and Revenge Assaulting Impact. You're going to chain these two. It's going to do more than 4,500 in 2 turns, which will automatically kill things like Rex and Allosaurus Gen 2. And then On-Escape Rampage is the main reason you're going to use this. Without On-Escape Rampage, this thing would still probably be high alpha. Maybe mid alpha, but probably high alpha. On-Escape Rampage is awesome. Just something tries to swap out, you deal 2,600 damage to it. That's a little bit insane. This thing is the thing that will people that like are Woolly Rhino stands in tournaments that they use Woolly Rhino and they enjoy it. I use Woolly Rhino in tournaments. That's because it's needed. Those people have a hate for this thing because this is the ultimate Woolly Rhino counter. Because it's hard to swap into a Woolly Rhino when whatever you swap, whichever dino is swapping out is just gonna die, especially if it's at the end of a round. And then it's kind of hard to get your Woolly Rhino out of there if it's being trapped by this thing, and then it's probably going to die if it tries to swap out. So yeah, ultimate Woolly Rhino murderer. Alright, our last epic in the low elite is Velociraptor. I would say this is just slightly better than Electro Gamma, but this thing is good. Velociraptor is a beast. So it's got the base stats are identical to Oricogama except for slightly less base damage. Resistances are pretty similar, except this one doesn't have like the distract and crit reduction resistance, but it has full bleed immune. And then I don't remember if Oricogama has stun resistance. I don't think it doesn't. This one also, yeah, this one's got stun immune. Okay, Cautious Strike. Cautious Strike is absolutely ridiculous. Why would you put it on something that isn't Indoraptor Gen 2? I don't know. If we weren't in a resilient, like in a highly resilient environment right now, then this thing would automatically be in at least high elite. But since we have a ton of resilience running around, this thing isn't, Cautious Strike isn't quite as crazy. Honestly, the big thing of this is you could just gonna cycle rampages, each doing 2,800. So 5,600 in 2 turns is a lot. Which is the sole reason why I think this is better than Oricogama, because it does so much more damage, and I would say it has a bit more survivability too because of Cautious Strike. It also can't be stunned by those woolly rhino swaps. Deliberate Prowl is kind of bad, but it's not awful. It could still be used to cleanse the slowing effects, although some things that slow you are still going to kill you on the next turn anyways. If it was the Priority Prowl, I would actually say it's better. Yeah. And plus it increases your crit chance for the next rampage, which is cool. Yeah, Velociraptor is a beast. I love it. Alright, time for the legendaries. Starting with Carbodoceratops. Carbodoceratops is one of the, if not the best legendary in this tier. Compsognathus gets a little bit too much hate. I don't really think it's that bad. However, it could be better. This is probably the best Compsognathus edition since the, except for the 1.9 version. But since the 1.13 nerf, since this thing didn't have the old overpowered Spear of Vulnerability version, then this is the best it's ever been. Because, of course, Compsognathus had no HP in 1.13 and 1.14. And this thing literally has more survivability than Doedicurus. Just a little bit more, but more. And then this thing has a pretty good damage output. Exposed Weak Spot actually isn't as bad as it would be on something that doesn't have Devastation. But this thing's vulnerability is just going to last forever, so you can go Distraction again or Dig In again, and you're still going to have that Devastation. It's still going to be a vulnerable Devastation, which will do 4,500 damage. That's kind of crazy. Although the Devastation can be blocked quite easily. No one cares about these resistances. Of course, this thing is extremely slow. It's a turtle. What did you expect? And then Diggin's good. Distraction's okay. Swap and Headbutt is not a very good swap and move, but it's still a swap and damage move that stuns it, and I will give it points for that. Even though it only does 500 damage. But you probably wouldn't be using it to kill things, rather just to stun them and maybe kill them with a distraction, and then get your Exposed Weak Spot Devastation combo on whatever they bring in next. So yeah. Carbodo unfortunately does not have a slowing move, which is the reason this is not higher than it is. If it had like Distracting Strike, and then instead of Exposed Weak Spot, and it had Spear of Vulnerability instead of Distraction, then this thing would be mid elite. But it doesn't, so it's in low elite. Alright, next legendary is Titanoboa. Titanoboa is probably the weakest creature in this tier. So Titanoboa, I was really close to putting this in high alpha, because this thing is not good. In fact, the main use it had before was beating Monolometrodon. Monolometrodon got nerfed, so that main use is basically gone. However, I will still put it in this tier, because it beats Alraptor, and it gets pretty close to beating Earldom and Elickospix. Actually, probably not Elickospix, but it gets really close to beating Earldom. And it still has some noteworthy... It's got some fierce matchups, too. It beats Thor, I think. I think it beats Mortem if Mortem doesn't crit. Wait, no, I don't think it does, but it'd be really close. Um, this thing just doesn't have that good damage output. 42 out of the 2 turns isn't awful, but it's worse than it could be. Precise Impact is trash, but the rest of its moves are alright. The base damage kind of sucks, and the health isn't that great, but the speed is obviously awesome. Yeah, the Codinops is just it's if Pirate Hitter wasn't the thing, then this would be the weakest cunning legendary. Yeah, it's not good, but it could be worse. Alright, Darosopteryx, another one of the weakest low elite creatures. Darosopteryx, I do think, is a little bit underrated. People say this thing's worse than Dimodactylus. I completely disagree, because this thing actually has a health pool to speak of. It's got 1200 more HP than Dimodactylus, and it's got 1 more speed. So, the moveset isn't as good as Dimodactylus, but it's not like an awful moveset. Fierce Impact and Invincibility are kind of useless. Although I guess Fierce Impact can be used after you swap in. Though my recommended combo would be Swap and Wound and a Resilient Strike and then Minor Swoop. Although, well, I guess this thing is really fast, so as long as it's something that won't slow you, then Fierce Impact could work too. But yeah, this thing's a Swap in Bleed Dino. It does Swap in Bleed Dino things. And it loses to things that Swap and Bleed Dinos lose to. Actually, this one does do good against some cunning creatures, but still. So yeah, it's not good, but again, it could be worse, like the Codinops. Alright, Dilophoboa. Dilophoboa is one of the best creatures in this tier. This thing is an ultimate distraction machine. It's going to completely shear through fierce creatures like they are nothing. This thing has so much distraction. So, the base stats are the health is kind of low, the damage is kind of low, the speed's pretty alright. The resistances are actually pretty good. Distraction immune is really the big thing, and then stun resistance and swap adventure resistance are nice too. Cunning Strike's fine, Precise Rampage is fine, Null Impact's fine. Sidestep's really good because it allows it to get more of those counters off to distract whatever you're fighting even more. If only Spinal Constrictor had sidestep, then Spinal Constrictor would actually be higher than this tier. Spinal Constrictor is the only unique that's even this low. On Escape Evasive Strike is kind of bad, but it's still an on escape move, which means it's not too bad. If it was on Escape Rampage, this would be Metal Elite, 100%. Yeah, Dilophoboa is fine. Although Titanoboa is probably slightly better. Okay, Tyrannosaurus, another one of the weaker end creatures in this tier. So this is cunning. This is a raid dino. It's Stylochirus, but worse. Stylochirus we'll get to later. So the health is fine. The damage is good. The speed is meh. It's just the moveset's kind of bad. So you heal a lot, but you won't be dishing too much damage. 3750 in 2 turns isn't terrible, but it isn't that good either. Especially for a cunning creature that's a legendary. That said, Dalrano is not too, as bad as it could be. For its rarity, it's not as bad as Dalrachirus, but of course it's weaker than Dalrachirus overall. Okay, Keratoporcus. Keratoporcus is... I think I would probably put it near the middle of this tier. Keratoporcus gets overrated by some, and then underrated by some. Although I see it more overrated than underrated. Porky is pretty bad. But not, really bad. It's got some okay base stats. The health is good, and the armor's good, too. The damage is and the speed sucks. The stun immunity is cool. The moveset is just so fierce. This is the fierce moveset. Mutual Fury and then 3 shattering moves. That basically explains what an Enteldaunt does in this game. If this thing had more Woolly Rhino stuff, like a swap-in ability, then this thing would be absolutely busted. So so this thing does have 4,200 output in 2 turns, which isn't too bad, and it's shattering, but it could be better. Mutual Fury actually kind of bad on this creature. It's worse on this than it would be than it is on Entomoth. Um, Mostly because this thing's a lot slower than Entomoth. So on Entomoth, it will make you faster than almost everything, but on this creature, it'll only bring you to, I believe, 121. Yeah, Keratoporcus isn't that good, but it, again, could be worse. Notopada Titan. I would put this probably mid to low elite, like mid to low, middle of low elite, or lower end of low elite. So this thing is a tank with flags that doesn't do any damage. So its health is amazing. 40% armor is amazing. This thing has ridiculous survivability. In fact, I'm pretty sure so far in this list, this is the creature with the highest effective HP. I think it has more than Doedicurus and Carbotoceratops. So the other stats are kind of trash. And this is identical to Draft Titan, which means they're pretty good. The moveset is kind of the moveset's just bad. So Resilient Strike and Disorienting Impact, Taunting Shields are okay moves, but in conjunction with each other, I don't think they're enough. And then Taunting Bellow does not work for this creature one bit when it has other moves to do what it does. Taunting Shields for shielding, Disorienting Impact, Resilient Strike for slowing down. This thing just doesn't have enough 2-turn damage. This will only do 3,000 in 2 turns, which I guess is not awful for something this tanky, but it's not as good as I would like it to be. Like if this thing got Rampage instead of like Taunting Bellow, and then maybe got and then maybe got like a medium counterattack, this thing would be mid elite easily. But no, it doesn't. It can survive a ton though. It's a really good it's good at beating up Cunnings. Okay, Paramoloch. Paramoloch is Bahatonodon, but better. It's just more. It's still a raid dino through, but it's got more PvP options than Bahatonodon. So, just slightly less health in it, but much more speed. This thing is actually really fast. Bahatonodon is really slow. Its resistances, except for the stun resistance, the resistances are completely useless on it. So Group Cleansing Strike is Lesser Group Heal is Group Shield's good, Instant Charge is good. This thing, again, doesn't have much damage output, 3,002 turns, but it's a healer, what do you expect? But it can stall pretty decently with the heal, the shield, and Instant Charge. You'll probably, I would say you would probably shield on turn 1, and then Instant Charge, and then shield, and then heal, and then Instant Charge. Repeat. Yeah, that's probably what my move order would be. Well, no. Shield, Instant Charge, shield, heal. Instant Charge. Whatever. It's just a annoying staller. Alright, Pokéday. Pokéday is probably the best creature in this tier, I would say. Pokéday is actually pretty good. It's another cunning, and it's actually an eagle that is not terrible. Although I guess the unique one's not awful either. Where are you? There you are. Okay, let's talk about the design first. I love this creature's design. I think they did really good just designing this creature. Now on to the battle. Okay, the base stats are astounding. These are some of the best base stats in the entire game. The moveset, less so. Like, they have this thing Pounce, and it is probably on the top end of mid-elite. As you give it Pounce is at a distraction, because distraction sucks in this creature. But yeah, its damage output's kind of low. Really, distraction is the only problem move I see on it. The rest of these moves are fine on it. Although, maybe distraction, you could probably put distraction in the place of evasive strike, and then Pounce or the place of distraction. So Fearless Flap's obviously really good, and Instant Distraction is decent. Yeah. It absolutely wrecks Fierce creatures. I think I think it beats Mortem Rex. I know it beats Thor. Yeah. Okay. Spinosuchus. Spinosuchus is another bleeder. Um, it's it's this thing used to be absolutely busted back in the day. Like back in 1.5, this is the best legendary in the game. It was super strong during the bleed meta. Yeah, it was really good. Now, not so much. Spinosuchus would probably be a mid-ranking legendary for in low elite. So it's got its base stats are not awful, I guess. The moveset is also just completely unnoteworthy. You can double stack bleed, which is really good, and critical impact does some damage, but it's not enough damage output, and this thing can be slowed down, unlike Spinonyx, which we'll get to like 2 tiers later. Yeah. It's fine. Yeah. I'm getting tired already. Okay, Utah Sinoraptor. Um, so Utah Sinoraptor is just a shell of its former self. Um, yeah. Remember when this thing had 1600 base damage and critical impact and decelerating strike? Those are the days. Now this thing is garbage. 4200 to 2 turns is not awful, but it's so much less than it used to be. It's frail. It's not. It's not really that fast for a cunning. Instant charge is the thing that makes it unique, and instant charge is a good move, but it's not enough to keep this thing to keep this thing from being weak. Yeah, poor Utah Sinoraptor. I hope it gets some of its old glory back. All right, our last creature in this tier is Spinoconstrictor. So, Spinoconstrictor is the worst unique in the game, in my opinion. And our first unique on the tier list. This is also by a pretty decent margin. Titanoboa was better than this, and this is probably on par with Dilophoboa. So, the base stats are direct downgrade of Dilophoboa's base stats. The resistances are a direct downgrade of Dilophoboa's resistances. And the moveset is almost a direct downgrade. Distraction instead of Cunning Strike, downgrade. Evasive Stance instead of Sidestep, I would say is kind of a downgrade. Instant Distraction's good, but Null Impact would be cool, but it doesn't have enough space for it. Wound Encounter is what keeps this thing from being absolutely trash. Because Wound Encounter is a good move. It's a really good counterattack. It's kind of like Greater Rending Attack, but it can't be distracted or dodged or anything like that. And then it still has on-escape evasive strike. So yeah, this thing needs some work. It's just not good, especially by unique standards. Yeah. Alright, moving up to mid elite, and this is where I announced that I'll be splitting the elite tiers into 2 videos because I am too tired to finish out mid elite and high elite. So this one I'll just be doing the rares and epics in mid elite. In the next episode, I'll finish off legendaries and uniques and then do high elite. And then the last episode will be all these tyrant and overlord creatures. Okay, so starting with the rares, there are 4 rares here, and these will be the last rares in the tier list. We are starting with Andrewsarchus. Andrewsarchus is a beast. This is basically what an Entelodon, what JWA Entelodons wanted to be. It's decel immune. It has, except for health, it has good base stats. It has a very fierce moveset, and it's going to 2-shot nearly everything. And it has no escape, which is what makes this thing ridiculous. If it didn't have no escape, it would be low elite. But no escape just pushes this thing over the edge. This thing is ridiculous for a rare, and it's actually one of the best non-hybrids in the game, too. I would still say this is near the bottom of mid elite, just because it gets heated in mid elite, and it's really crowded, too. But this thing is still a beast, especially in rare tournaments. Alright, Marsupial Lion. Marsupial Lion is the other crazy rare non-hybrid. I would say Marsupial Lion is ever so slightly better. Because While Andrewsarchus, I'm pretty sure only has a chance to beat Gemini Titan if it crits. Gemini Titan or Tennis Maxima if it crits. Marsupial Lion guaranteed kills them both. So this thing is an absolute just crazy monster. The base stats, of course, are nowhere near as impressive. The health is better, but the other two stats are worse. Its resistances are basically the same. And then the moveset is what's different. Still has Rending Takedown. That's where the similarities end. Prowl is the only weak move on this. The only move that I don't really care about on this creature. But Minor Rending Attack, you're going to believe this thing... If you don't crit, and if you didn't have the counterattack, you'd leave everything that didn't distract or dodge it or resist Rend. You basically leave all that on 6% HP. But the counterattack is what's going to take the rest of that 6%, which will mean you two-shot everything that doesn't do the things that would reduce this thing's damage. Yeah, Marsupial Lion is, it's insane. It's basically what a Chomper wanted to be. Like what the Rex animation dinos wanted to be. Okay, Perlith. Perlith is a, it's Taurus, but weirder, and I would say better. So it's got worse base stats than Taurus, basically everywhere. But the moveset is absolutely ridiculous. All of these rares, by the way, are near the bottom of this tier. Yeah. So, Defense Shrouding Strike, cool. Short defense is fine. Ferocious Strike and heal on a Rending counterattack hurt is absolutely ridiculous. And then throw No Escape in there for good measure. So, Ferocious Strike, that's going to make these Rending counterattacks do 37.5% of the opponent's max health. Why? Isn't that a bit excessive for a rare? Like, sure, Gripple is doing the same thing, but it has an excuse because it's a unique. This thing doesn't have an excuse for being this crazy. And then it has heal, too, which means on turn 2, you're basically going to heal 2250 health from that Ferocious boost. And then while still doing crazy counterattacks. This thing is absolutely ridiculous for a rare. Yeah. Okay, now, a number 1 spot for the rares, in my opinion, would be Suikotator, which has almost always been the best rare in the game. Though this time, it's just by barely, because the last 3 we went over are really close. So Suikotator is versatile. It's extremely versatile. Its base stats are reasonable in all aspects. And then its moveset is the weirdest, but also one of the best movesets I've ever seen. Superiority Strike is... If it was Resilient Strike, this thing would be much higher. Well, higher in mid-elite. But with Superiority Strike is still good. It's still going to beat Cunning Creatures at that. Lethal Wound. Just put whatever you're fighting on a timer. Null Impact. Do some extra damage. And Instant Distraction. Stall for your other cooldowns. This thing is so versatile. And it is just crazy. If it had No Escape, mixed with Resilient Strike, and then had Decel Immune, this would be high elite. Yeah. Alright. Let's get the epics over with. Okay, first is Acro. This is another really controversial spot that a lot of people are going to disagree with. I really like Acro. And this is probably one of the weakest creatures in this is definitely one of the weakest creatures in mid-elite, but I still think it deserves to be here just because I think it's better than Titanoboa and Brachie. It's a chopper. It's a non-hybrid that beats Mammalinia. See if you can find anything else that does that. I'll wait. Yeah, it beats Mammalinia. And beating Mammalinia is basically what's going to get you in mid-elite if you're a non-hybrid. And it also beats Diplodocus, which makes it automatically better than Allogen 2 in Epic Tournaments. Its moveset is a Tomper moveset, and its stats are Chomper stats. But the health is what makes this thing better than the other non-hybrid Chompers. But yeah. Okay, Brontolasmus. Brontolasmus is Elasmotherium when it gets a little bit too angry. So, this is a hybrid between the 2 rhinos, and it is basically offensive Elasmotherium. So it does have less HP, but its damage is better. and then it has double rampages. I don't know who thought this is a good idea. Giving something that has really good effective HP, that's a resilient creature. Yeah, giving this thing 5,200 damage in 2 turns. This is going to beat basically all these chompers. It's going to obviously beat all these cutting creatures. The only thing that's stopping these are like shielded and heavily armored resilient creatures. Yeah, it's really good. All right, Entelchops. Entelchops is probably the strongest mid-elite epic. Although Indominus Gen 2 comes pretty close. We'll get Indominus Gen 2 next. So, where are you? I cannot find you. There you are. So, this is Moschops, but better. It's a little bit less tanky, but otherwise it's better. It's got the same resistances. It's still a swap and slow, which is completely useless on it. It's a lot faster. It has more damage. I don't know why this thing is this fast, by the way. Both the ingredients have quite a bit less speed. And then this thing has double rampages on revenge. Well, yeah, of course. The other one does too. Moschops does too. But this thing has higher base damage. So this thing's going to do 4,400 to 2 turns instead of 4,000 on revenge. And then here's where it gets a bit crazy. Mutual Fury on this creature is awesome because it's going to make their speed 139. And you are right to think that that's a little bit crazy for a resilient, for a non-cunning creature. Yeah. And then it's going to, whatever rampage follows the Mutual Fury is going to do 3,300 damage. And then it's going to cleanse all distraction effects, make you faster than all these cunning creatures. And what do you have? Something that has a way to deal with everything that isn't the Chomper. Yeah. Entelchops is really strong. Okay. Indominus Gen 2. Indominus Gen 2 is probably the only mid-elite epic that has a chance at challenging Entelchops' title. And Indom Gen 2 is not as good as Indom Gen 1, but it is still really strong. Its base stats are, except for speed, a direct downgrade of the legendary versions. Resistances are the same, except it's got less rend resistance. The moveset's a little bit weirder. So, Definite Strike's good. Mutual Fury is actually really good on this dino, because Mutual Fury was the reason it's able to beat Old Sarcorixis. Armor-Piercing Rampage, because it's an Indom. Why would it not have that? And then Cloak, once again, because it's an Indom. So, you can combo Mutual Fury, Cloak, Armor-Piercing Rampage, and do an ungodly amount of damage. And one-shot basically anything in the game that doesn't do things that would make you not do that. Yeah, this thing's really strong. Alright. Our last creature for this video is Sarcorixis. So Sarcorixis is definitely weaker than it used to be, of course, because it got nerfed. But Sarcorixis is still really strong. Of course, Old Sarcorixis was high elite, and there was no doubt about it. Old Sarcorixis was absolutely crazy, and it was easily the best epic in the game. And which made it the best non... in fact, it was almost as good as the best legendaries, too. Yeah. And it was an epic that could contend with uniques. And there's still a couple that do that today, but not to the degree this one did. Now it's not quite as OP, but it's still really strong. It still has the really crazy moveset, it's just stats are worse. Less speed, less resistances, less damage. Actually, more health for some reason. So this thing still has really good damage output because of Ferocious Impact. It still stuns a bunch. It's still tanky. It's slowable though. Overall, a shell of its former self, but still a beast. Alright, that'll end it for this video. I will do part 2 of this, of the Elite Tiers, probably tomorrow, and then I might even do Tyrant tomorrow as well. Yeah. So, it turns out this is not the, will not be the longest video on my channel so far. Because I decided halfway through this that I didn't want to have to do the entire thing in one video, because that would take way too long. So I decided to split it up in 2. Alright, see you in part 2. Join the Discord if you want to. Let me know what you think in the comments and on the Discord. Subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.